And therefore, I'd like to talk about Hanukkah and really give you an explanation which most people have never heard of before. Now, we all know the story, obviously, of the Syrian Greeks attacking the Beis Hamikdash, the temple, and of course there arose Matisyahu Kohen Gadol, and he fought them together with his sons, and of course ultimately they won, which was itself an incredible miracle. And therefore they came to the Beis Hamikdash, and they found that there was only one vial of oil which had not been contaminated, tumah, and they lit it, and it lit for 8 days. And of course, Chazal decided that this occasion would become a holiday, a Yom Tov that would be celebrated until the end of time, basically until the Mashiach comes. So we all know the story, but when you really think about it, that's not the real story, as I will show you. So therefore, the first question that I would like to ask is, what is the essence of Hanukkah? Now there are two major miracles that happened, if you think about it. One is that the Jews were victorious against the Greeks. And the Syrian Greeks, they had a tremendous army. They had over 125,000 battle-hardened soldiers. And maybe there were 10,000 Jews. So that itself is a miracle, that such a small number of Jews vanquished such a large number of real combat soldiers. And the second ness, which you recognize, is the ness of course, the Menorah. That one vial of oil that's supposed to burn for 1 day, it burned for 8 days. But as obvious as that is, there is a question: which is the main miracle? Because when you think about it, they were both miracles. The war was one, and like I said, the burning of a candle or a ner, oil for 8 days. So which is it? Which is the main miracle? That is the question. And it's hard to say that they're both the main miracle. Now, the next idea is also a problem, you see. Why did Chazal make this a holiday? The Jews had been saved and delivered from persecution and so on many times. So why did they make this a holiday? What guides them into knowing when to make this a holiday? You see. Now, the real miracle, which we begin to understand, was the war, because that's what they fought for. They fought against the Greeks to restore the Beis Hamikdash, the temple, and they won. Why did the Menorah happen? In fact, what's interesting is that 3 years after they won the battle, that's when the ner happened. So the question is, what is the ner burning? What does that miracle have to do with the war itself? You see. And we have the concept that there are 8 of them. Why are there 8 Chanukah lights? Is there something more profound than just the fact that there were took 8 days until they got new pure oil? You see. So when you really think about it, there's really a lot of questions that one can ask about Hanukkah. So that's the idea. What is the real essence of Hanukkah? So what I'm going to tell you is something which is really a fundamental principle of every Jewish holiday. The Jewish people are assigned a task, and that is to bring a tikkun, to rectify, to correct some spiritual defect or a spiritual necessity in creation. And the usual way they do that is what is called an event. So the event itself sets up the Jew, it provides a test, and if the Jew is successful, then the tikkun is complete. They will have accomplished the spiritual task that they are assigned, you see. So that is called the tikkun event, but it's called the primary tikkun event. That is called the event which is primary, which is the most important. But what happens if the Jews don't do that? What happens if the task that they are assigned in order to, fulfill the spiritual event, what happens if they don't do it? So what God does, which is interesting, is he sets up a second event that in some way will allow the Jews a second chance. And therefore, that second event we can call the secondary tikkun event. Now, this is a very important principle in history, you see. The primary event and the secondary event. Now, when we take a look at Chanukah, what's interesting is we will realize that Chanukah was a setup. That means it really was a secondary event that in some way had to undo or make up for the failure in a previous event of some type of spiritual necessity. Once you understand the principle, the concept of a secondary event, then you can begin to understand what Hanukkah is all about. You see. So therefore, what we must do is identify the primary event. What was the event that the Jews were supposed to have done, which they failed? And therefore, God set up an entire historical event so that they should be able to do it again and succeed. And this becomes the real understanding of faith. So, in order to understand what the primary event was, there are certain ideas you must know.
Amy, tell somebody to mute.
Please mute yourself.
Yes, somebody has to mute themselves. Okay. First idea. It says in the beginning of Breshit, right? It says there that Vayer Vayivoke Yom Echad. It was evening and morning, one day. Now, it doesn't say Yom Rishon, the first day. That is called a ordinal number, where you have one, first, second, third, fourth, and so on. All the other days it says the ordinal numbers, which is Yom Sheni, the second day, third day, fourth day, and so on. But on the first day, it doesn't say Yom Rishon, it says Yom Echad. And Yom Echad means one day. It doesn't mean the first day, it means one day. So the question is, what does that mean? So Rashi says, because on that day, Yom Echad, one day, it doesn't mean one day, it means Yom Shel Echad, the day of the one. Because on that day, the only being that existed was God. Angels were created on the second day. Therefore, Yom Echad means Yom, the day, Echad of the one, who was God. Because on that day, he was the only one that really existed, the only being with consciousness, so to speak, that existed. So therefore it says Yom Echad, the day of the one. But if you want to think about it, there could be another reason why. Because on that day, even though God created many things, you saw the connection between God and everything he made. You saw the connection. And you saw that everything emanates from God. You see. So even though there were many things that God created, but you saw that it all emanates from God himself. So therefore, even though there was a plurality of many things, since everything was connected to God, the one, so it's Yom Echad, the day of one. You see. So it was the day of the one because everything emanates from God. You see. Now that is a very interesting concept. The concept that everything emanates from God. Now we don't really know exactly how that works. ultimately that will be revealed. And that is really called the Or HaGonos, the hidden light, or it's called the Or Rishon, the first light. That is really something that we will all experience, hopefully very shortly. You see, this concept where everything emanates from God, and you realize that there is nothing else but God, and everything completely flows from Him, is what's called a Messianic light. That is the Or Mashiach, you see. See, what you realize is something very important. What God introduced when He created the world is the concept of Hester, concealment. And the concealment that God introduced takes place through the idea called Pirud, separation. So on the first day, there was no Pirud. There was no separation. And therefore, there was no Hester. There was no concealment. It was all revealed. It was all exposed, you see. And that really is the Messianic light. That is what everybody sees. Because in the end of time, what God reveals is that everything is really connected to Him. That's the revelation, which means that there's no period, there's no separation anymore. We will see everything, how it all emerges from God Himself. The Achdut, the ultimate unity of creation. Now, when we get to see that, and the answer is, that is the Messianic light, you see. And that's what it means, that the earth will be filled with the knowledge of God as the waters covers the sea. What does that mean? That's a famous pasuk in the Navi, you know, that the world will be Mola Oretz Deo, will be filled with the knowledge of God. You mean there's no other knowledge? And the answer is no. Because on that day when the Mashiach comes, and I mean the Mashiach ben Yosef, by the way, then there will only be the knowledge of God, because everything else is connected to God. So in a certain sense, once we see God is connection to everything else, then the knowledge of the Messianic era will be the knowledge of God. And it is through the knowledge that everything emerges from God, right, that everything will be seen. So ultimately, that's all you need. All you need is God to reveal Himself and to show how everything emanates from Him. That is the Messianic light, of which we have absolutely no comprehension of what that will be like, you see. But it will happen. Now, how do we know it's the Messianic light? Right? We do know that this was the light. Light, by the way, means understanding or perception. You know, like when somebody says to you, do you see the light? It doesn't mean light. It means, do you see the understanding, the insight, and so on? Now, how do we know that this is the Messianic light, Mashiach ben Yosef? And the answer to that is, take a look at the end of the Torah. When Moshe Rabbeinu was blessing the Jews, he says, B'chol Shoroi, he's blessing Yosef, Shevet Yosef, the tribe of Joseph. B'chol Shoroi Hodoloi. B'chol means the firstborn of his ox, because the sign of Yosef is an ox. So the firstborn of this ox, Hodoloi, beauty is his. You see, V'kani Re'em, and the horns of the Re'em, right? V'kani Re'em is his karnov. What's the kani of a Re'em? You see, now we would expect that if this is an ox, then the horns of this ox should be very strong, short, stout, strong. But the horns on this ox is not the horns of an ox. It was the horns of an animal called a Re'em. It's basically a mythical animal that we do not know really what it was. But apparently the horns of the Re'em were horns that in certain ways looked like, you ever see an antelope or a goat? Some of its horns are magnificent, the way it comes out of his head. It's beautiful to look at. It's not a short horn. It's horns that are beautiful to look at, you see. So the horns of this ox, which is the firstborn of the ox, Yosef, beautiful is his horns. And then it says in the Pasuk, right, the Kani Re'im Karnov, and the horns of the Re'im is his horns, right? Ubahem, and with these horns, Amim Yenagach, he will go the nations. That's the bracha that Moshe Rabbeinu gave Yosef. Now, so therefore we have to understand that. What do you mean the horns of this Re'im? He will go the nations. Because really what Moshe was saying is an allegory. It's a metaphor. What does that mean? Here's the metaphor. A metaphor is something which really reveals something else. It's like a code that stands for something else. So let's take a look at the code. B'chor Shoroi, the firstborn of his ox. Who is that? That is the Mashiach ben Yosef. Because he's the firstborn of Yosef. He's the greatest neshama of Yosef. And he is called B'chor Shoroi, the firstborn of his ox. Okay? So that's Mashiach ben Yosef. Okay? So B'chor Shoroi Hodoloi. This Mashiach ben Yosef is beautiful to look at. Right? What's the beauty? That Kani Re'im Karnov. What's beautiful about the Mashiach ben Yosef is that his horns, right, are the horns of a Re'im. What is that supposed to mean? What it means is not that Mashiach ben Yosef has horns. What it means, therefore, the whole concept of horns is a metaphor. Because what are the horns? The horns emanate from the head of the ox, or the Re'im. Not only does it emanate from the head, right, but it is used as weapons, right? So that's what he means, Moshe Rabbeinu, that the horns or the weapons of Mashiach ben Yosef emanate from his head, you see. What weapons emanate from somebody's head? And the answer is Chokhmah, wisdom. What wisdom is that? That is the wisdom of the Orishan. You see? But it's beautiful. What is beauty, really? What's the definition of beauty? The definition of beauty is when many things which look separate, fragmented, are really tied as one unit. It's a harmony, it's a blend, where everything is together, even though they look like many fragments. That's what beauty is. As an example, what is beauty in music, for instance? Well, if you listen to, let's say, one of Beethoven's symphonies, it's beautiful. What does that mean? Because a symphony is nothing more than a bunch of musical notes. It's sound frequencies, and there are hundreds of them in a symphony. So each one in and of itself is one note or one sound frequency. But when you put them together in a certain way, a melody, you see, a harmony, a counterpoint, and you put it together in a certain arrangement, it's beautiful to listen to. That's beautiful. That's beauty. Where all of the sound frequencies blend. See, that's beauty in music. For instance, another kind of beauty, for instance, is, let's say, in paintings. You know, painting consists of many, many different elements. You know, it has color, it has form, shade, all kinds of things. And somehow, when you see them all together, it's a painting. So a painting is beautiful because it unites and combines many, many different elements. That's what beauty is, you see. It's a tremendous harmonious blend where everything fits exactly. Everything's connected. That's what the Orishan is. The Orishan is a chokhmah. It's an unbelievable wisdom, insight, where everything connects. which is what I explained. The Or Rishon is really the Yom Echad. It's one day where everything emanates from God, you see. And therefore, that concept or that insight, that revelation is the Or Mashiach. And that's what Mashiach ben Yosef will reveal. And in many ways, that is exactly, really, what his task is. Good. So we now understand the concept of the Or Rishon. Now, let's move forward and now take a look at what is the historical event that went what's called awry. It went off, went wrong. And the answer to that is Matan Torah. What happened at Matan Torah? Well, the Jews accepted the oral law. Right? They accepted the written law, and then they accepted the oral law. But what happened was something strange. You see, even though they accepted the oral law, Moshe Rabbeinu did not come down, and many of them, the Erev Rav, whatever, decided to build a physical representation of God, and that was a golden calf, the Egel HaZov. But wait a minute. You can't build an Egel HaZov because God cannot be represented by any physical object. You see, that's how Avodah Zorah starts. But God is beyond physical. So how can he be represented by any physical object? You see. What does that mean? That's really the Or Rishon. You see. The Or Rishon is that God is not physical, and nothing physical could represent him. You see. Because God is the source. He's the ultimate idea behind everything. What is that idea? That is the Or Rishon. So what happened is when the Jews made the Egel, the golden calf, somehow that was a rejection of the Or Rishon, of that concept that you cannot have a physical entity representing God, because not only that God is not physical, right, but he is the root of everything. So therefore, they created a pagam, a defect. And you see, so they should have been makabel, the Torah Sheba'al Peh, Torah Sheba'Ksav, which they were, the Torah Sheba'al Peh, which they were, but they were never really makabel, the Or Pnimi, which is really the Or Rishon. That God himself is the root of everything. It cannot be represented not only by a physical object, but by any singular object. Therefore, they damaged the act of Kabbalah, They damaged the act of receiving and accepting that aspect of the Torah, that God is the root of everything, you see. And therefore that needed a tikkun. That needed the Kabbalah of the Or Rishon, that God ultimately is the root of everything and all things emanate from God. That needed to be rectified. And if it was, then that would produce a tremendous spiritual rectification, spiritual necessity. But they failed at Matan Torah. And that was very bad. So what does God do? So what God does is he has to give the Jews another occasion where they can again be tested and this time pass. And then they will have done a tikkun of the Egel HaZov in that way. You see, they will have a tikkun by accepting the Messianic Light. And remember what it is, that the underlying root of everything is God. There is nothing else. And that would be the tikkun of that chet, which is a very important idea, you see. Now, there is a pasuk, okay, which is very important, in Bahaloischa, where it says Aaron that all the Nesiim, all the heads of the tribes, brought korbanot, brought korbanos. But Aaron was not commanded to bring any korban. And he had what's called tremendous chalisha sadas, tremendous despair. Why? Because Aaron felt that the reason why God did not ask him to bring also a korban, because remember, he was the head of the Kohanim, was because Aaron is the one who contributed to the sin of the golden calf. You remember, he was the one who contributed to the sin of the calf. So he felt that the reason why God did not ask him to bring a korban, he wasn't commanded, because God had not forgiven him for his contribution to the sin of the golden calf. So God told him something very interesting. And this is what the Mendel says. In fact, Rashi brings it down. Chol shadaitoi, that the mind of Aaron became tremendously depressed because of what I just said, that he thought God had not forgiven him. So God told him, I want to tell you something, Aaron, you see. And what he told him was very interesting, that in the end of time, the korbanos of the Beit HaMikdash, that all the Siyam, the princes of the tribes brought, that someday will be gone, because the Beit HaMikdash will be destroyed. But your candle, your lighting the menorah, which of course is the job of Aaron, that will go on till the end of time. Now, the Ramban asks, he says, wait a minute. Not only when the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed, so obviously there's no more korbanos, there are no more sacrifices anymore, right? However, when the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed, well, guess what? There's no more lighting of the menorah, right? So that's also gone. So what does it mean that God told Aaron in order to lift his spirits, right, and to show him that God forgave him for his contribution to the golden calf, right? So what did God mean? That the act of lighting the candles will go on till the end of time. So the Ramban says something which is very important. He said what God said is that in the end, of course, the menorah will be over, because the Beis HaMikdash is destroyed. But what will happen is that in the future, right, there will be somebody called, right, Yochanan Matesio, right, who is a Kohen Gadol. He will again light the menorah, right, and that is the miracle of Hanukkah. In other words, the temple will be rededicated, and he will light the menorah. But what's more important is the Hanukkah candles will be lit till the end of time, not as a menorah in the Beis HaMikdash, but as every Jew lighting Hanukkah lights. You see? So the Ramban says in this midrash, where it says that Aaron lit the candles, and therefore he was pacified by God, is the hint of Hanukkah. You see? Therefore, that hint of Hanukkah that God spoke to Aaron in lighting the menorah, the Beit HaMikdash, is the secret of Hanukkah. That's where you find the secret. How do we understand this? What does Hanukkah lights that we light have to do with the menorah in the Beis HaMikdash and with the tikkun of the Chet Egel, or a tikkun that there was a defect, the pagam, in the Kabbalah of the Or Mashiach, or the Or Pnimi? You see? That is the question. Here's what happened. And then we will understand really what Hanukkah is. In the beginning of the Torah, it says, and there was darkness on the face of the deep. It says, and the earth was unformed and void. And darkness, was on the face of the deep. And the Midrash says that these four terms, soyu, voyu, unformed, void, empty, choshech, darkness, and tohim, the deep waters or the abyss, these four terms allude to the four kingdoms. What was that?
The four exiles.
Yes, these four terms refer to the four kingdoms in which will rule over the Jews. They are, as you say, the four exiles. Who are they? There's Babylon, right? Then there is Persia. Then there's Greece, and there's Rome. Now, Tohu refers to Babylon, Bovel. Voyu refers to Persia, you see. Choshech refers to Greece. And Tohoim refers to Rome. Now, that's very difficult to understand. Why? Because historians consider Greece the forerunner of modern civilization. Because under Aristotle and Alexander and Greek philosophy, Greek science, this was the change. This was a tremendous evolution of modern thinking, and it started with the Greeks. So how could Greece be called darkness? If anything, it should be light. And the idea to that is Greece has turned darkness. Why? Because the darkness of Greece is the exact opposite of the light of the first day. What does it say, right? Vayer vayivok yom echad, right? Right? And it says, and there was morning and evening and morning one day. What was that? And God saw, and he created light. And God saw that the light was good, right? And then it says, and there was, right? And there was darkness and morning on that day. What does that mean? That means that the light now became dark, you see. What does that mean? That means that the darkness was the exact opposite of the light. Now, we know the light wasn't a physical light. It was the Orishim. It was the insight that everything is connected to God. So therefore, the darkness means that they also believe in the harmony of the Bria, but it's not God. It's physical nature. It's nature. Things run by themselves, by what's called physical laws. Therefore, what Greece did, Greece was a very interesting country, you see. What Greece held, this is what they believed, is that everything is organized. Everything does blend and is harmonious. That is true, you see. But the root of all things is not God. It's not spiritual. It is physical. You see, it's natural law, science, and so on. And this is all illustrated by Aristotle and Pythagoras and so on. So what's interesting about Greece is that Greece also believes in an Orishon, or rather, they also believe in an internal structure, you see. But that internal structure is not spiritual. It is the laws of science. That's what Greece believes in, you see. Now, therefore, remember, so the philosophy of Greece is the exact opposite of the Orishon. It is similar because they also believe that all nature is a harmonious blend. It's all connected. But the root of it is not, or what connects it, is not God or spirituality. It is science. It's the rules and laws of nature, you see. That's the Greek thought. And therefore the Greeks believe in the supremacy of man, not God. And that's why they were tremendously into themselves, physical prowess, especially Sparta and so on, That's why they had the Olympics and all that. See, they were very much into the human body because they believed man is the root of everything. So what did God do? What God did is very interesting. He allowed a guy, his name was Alexander the Great, to conquer the entire world and to bring this philosophy of that everything is really one idea, but it is physical, not spiritual. He allowed Alexander to conquer the entire world. It was incredible, the success of Alexander, you see. And he captured the entire world. He went as far as India. but he captured the entire Middle East, you see. And when he was 33 years old, he died because his job was over. In fact, the teacher of Alexander was Aristotle, the great Aristotle, you see. So what Alexander had accomplished is that he brought modern thinking, the whole concept that the world is not fragmented into individual phenomena, but rather the world is really based on one idea called the laws of science. He brought down to the entire Middle East, and that's what God wanted. And then they, of course, began to try to change the world. So they introduced Greek thought and belief, and philosophy and science throughout. And one of the places, now Alexander died, right? And there were 4 generals that took over his kingdom, you see. And the one who took over the Middle East, or Syria, was somebody called Antiochus Epiphanes. He was a general under Alexander who took over one of the areas that Alexander had conquered, and that was the Middle East. That was Judea, you see. And therefore, true to form, he began to introduce the whole concept of Greece, Greek thought, and so on. He began to introduce that into Judea. And that became the battle of Matasio and the Maccabees, right? And they fought that because there were many Jews that were beginning to think that way, you see, that the world is really connected, but from a physical standpoint, not spiritual. Now, why did God do that? Because he now wanted to see, well, will the Jews be Moshe Nefesh? Will they sacrifice themselves, right, to fight for the belief of what? That the world is connected, but to God. Everything emanates from God, you see? And that's the Orishim. So what God did, he purposely allowed the Greeks to spread their ideas to Judea, and therefore, will the Jews now fight for the belief of the Orishim, the belief of the Opnime, that everything is really connected, but not as science would say, but rather as the Orishim, the Mashiach would say, that everything emanates from God. Therefore, the battle of the Greeks and the Jews was now a test for the Jews to see, would they again reassert their belief in this Opnime, what's the real reality. And guess what? They did. They fought the Greeks for many years, you see, and many of them died, and they fought, and as a result of that, they passed the test. They actually had been metaken. They rectified the defect of the original Chet Egel. You see, in other words, they declared that we believe that really God runs the world, but not only runs the world, that everything emanates from him. So we now understand that Hanukkah was a setup that God purposely made, and that's why he had Alexander and the Greeks conquer the entire world, to bring that philosophy everywhere, and therefore to put the Jews to the test. Will they rectify this concept? And they did. That is the real concept of Hanukkah. The real war is not just a war physically, but it is a war of ideology. What do the Jews really believe? So by rejecting the Greek philosophy and even going to battle with them, they accepted the concept that behind everything is God, is a spiritual being, or rather, God himself. Now, what is interesting is that at that point in time, the Jews did it, but they didn't really know what they had accomplished. I mean, they won a war, and then they rededicated the temple, you see, but they didn't realize the tremendous tikkun, the spiritual rectification that they had performed. So God said, I'm going to send them a message. I'm going to show them what they did. So what he did was Amazing. He allowed the menorah. Now the menorah has seven different projections, lights. And that represents the Orishan, by the way. It is the Orishan of the 7 days of creation. That's why there are seven candles or oil wicks and so on. And what he did is that he allowed the Jews he created a miracle in the Menorah, which represents the Orishan. So they only had one vial, but he let it burn for 8 days, which is another 7. And therefore the Jews, the rabbis, realized what they did, that by them fighting the Greeks, they had restored the Shefa, the enormous holy influence of the tikkun, of the creation. They had restored, you see, because they saw that it wasn't just a miracle of the menorah, that the miracle of the menorah is the actual instrument that represents the Orishan. So they realized that they had done a tikkun for the Orishan, because instead of burning 1 day, it burnt 7, or rather 8, which means 7 more than 1. You see, that's what they realized, what they did. So we now understand the connection between the menorah, right, and the war. The war was the Mesiras Nefesh. The war was the actual battle where they rejected Greek philosophy and Greek thought, Greek science, you see. But the message to them, or what revealed to them the spiritual tikkun of what they did, was the menorah. And that was critical for them to realize what they did. Therefore, if that's the case, they realized that they brought down a new light, a new ore into creation, which is a spiritual necessity, which is the Kabbalah, the receiving of the Orishan. So they realized that since it's a new ore and not a reinforcement of a previous ore, spiritual task, therefore this has to be a holiday, you see. So therefore we now understand what God told Aaron, that you helped extinguish, right, through the Chet Egel, the tikkun of receiving the Messianic light, but your descendant, Matasio Kohen Gadol, right, he will again ignite the fire, he will ignite the Orishan, because he and his sons will fight, and the Jewish people will fight against the Greeks. And therefore, Aaron was pacified, you see, because he realized that one of his descendants will actually correct the mistake that he did, you see, and therefore he was pacified. And that is the connection, you see, because he realized that by doing the Chet Egel, or contributing to it, right, he had not only disabled an attempt by Moshe Rabbeinu to be Mashiach ben Yosef, he had ruined a messianic opportunity, but he also created a tremendous pagam in the Orishan itself, you see. And therefore, he was tremendously overjoyed to realize that his descendant, not the Shiur, the Kohen Gadol, which of course are the Kohanim, that they will rectify the actual tikkun of the reception of the Orishan. So now we understand exactly what Hanukkah is. Hanukkah was a secondary tikkun event, where God allowed the Jews again to rectify a defective reception of the Orishan by the Matan Torah, you see. Now, therefore, as a result of that, really what should have happened is that the Mashiach ben Yosef should have come. Because once they had rectified that, therefore the Mashiach ben Yosef could have come. So then why didn't he? And the answer is because of a sin that was committed by the Hashmonoim, by his very descendants. What was that sin? Because we know that the only ones who really can rule, right, is Yehuda. Sasya Shevet Me Yehuda, which means the only one who has a right to rule over the Jews, right, is a Davidic Messiah. Not Hashmonoim. Hashmonoim are Kohanim. Kohanim cannot rule. Now, as long as they were fighting the Greeks, the Hashmonoim who were Kohanim, fine. But once they won and they rededicated the temple, right, then they should have got off the throne and appointed a Nasi who was from the house of David, the house of David. But they didn't do that. You see, the Hashmonoim remained as rulers of the Jewish people. And therefore, they spoiled, they ruined the opportunity for the Mashiach to come. You see. And therefore, ultimately, what happened was Herod killed the last of the Hashmonoim. Ultimately, every one of them died. And that was the great sin of the Hashmonoim. And now we understand something very important. Why isn't there a Masechta Chanukah? You know, if you look at the Mishnayot, there are 63 tractates in the Talmud. 63 tractates, Masechtot, right, in the Gemara. Every holiday has a tractate. Psachim, Rosh Hashanah, Shabbos, you know, or every one of them. The only one, Purim, Megillah, Masechta Megillah, the only one that doesn't have one is Hanukkah. There is no such thing as Masechta Chanukah. And the laws of Hanukkah are really separate, or rather they're spread out to the other Masechtas. So the question is, why didn't Rabbeinu HaKadosh, Rabbi Yehuda Nossi, make a Masechta Chanukah? And the answer is, the Gemara says, because he was very angry at the Hashmonoim, you see, because they did not give the Nesius, they did not give the rulership to the house of David. So he said, I do not want to make a Masechta of Hanukkah in order to, you know, mention or commemorate their name. Now we think, well, maybe he was angry because Rebbe was from the house of David. And therefore he was angry. It was a personal slight to his honor. And the answer is no. Because like I said, when the Hashmonoim refused to get off the house of the ruling Israel, what they did is they did not allow the real Mashiach to come. So therefore, Rabbi Yehuda Nossi said that they did not deserve to have a Masechta of Hanukkah, you see. And that's what happened. And what is also interesting is that God gave them a certain amount of time to get off the throne and really for the Mashiach to appear. But they didn't. So if you remember your ancient history, Rome had 3 wars with Carthage. Carthage was a tremendous power. They were the rivals of Rome in Italy, of the Roman Empire. You had Carthage, which was in, I think, Tunisia, North Africa. And there were 3 wars to determine who would be the leader. They're called the Punic Wars. Now, the miracle of Hanukkah happened approximately 163 BCE, you see. And the last Punic War, there were 3 of them, between Carthage and Rome, happened in 148. So what is interesting is because the Hashmonoim didn't get off the throne, and therefore the Mashiach could not come, because remember, they had done a tikkun for the origin. Therefore, God gave victory to Rome in 148 BCE. That was the 3rd Punic War, where they destroyed Carthage. Literally, they destroyed it. And that was Rome, Edom, that was destined to destroy the Beis HaMikdash. But since you did not give, right, the Beis HaMikdash and the Mashiachos to the house of David, therefore God allowed Rome to become great, and ultimately they would destroy the Beis HaMikdash, which of course is the entire rulership of Israel over the land of Israel. You see, so that's an actual historical event that I believe happened because of the chet of the Hashmonoim. What's also interesting, we see this because if you take a look at the dreidel, well, first of all, the or in the Torah and Breshit Bar Lakim, or is the 25th word in the Torah. And we know Hanukkah is Chof Hei, right, the 25th day of Kislev. And the word or is the 25th word in the Torah, which is interesting. Also, when the Jews encamped 42 times, the 25th encampment is named Chashmono, which is interesting. And also, Chashmonoim, if you look at the letters of that word, it's Shemen Echad Ches Yoim. One vial, right? 8 days. That's actually in the word Chashmonoim. You see, and what's even more interesting is the 4 letters on the dreidel, right, is Nun Gimel He Shin, which stands for Nes Gadol Hoyasham. A great miracle happened there. Mm-hmm. Now, the gematria of Nun Gimel He Shin, right, is 358, which is the exact gematria of Mashiach. Now, it's interesting, I once gave this year, and somebody said, but in Israel, they don't have Nes Gadol Hoyasham, they have Nes Gadol Hoyapoi, right, which means a great miracle happened here, because they're in Israel. So that doesn't add up to Mashiach. So he asked me, how do I explain that? So I was able to answer him. God gave me the answer right on the spot. And I said, well, Nun Gimel He Pei is Gematria 138. And 138 is Gematria Tzemach, the outgrowth. And that's Mashiach. Es Tzemach David, right? Es Tzemach David, the offshoot of David, right? And that refers to Mashiach ben Yosef. So Tzemach is another name of Mashiach, and that is the gematria of Nun Gimel He Pei Nes Gadol Hoyapoi. I found that to be very, very interesting. Anyway, so we now understand all these things. We understand the essence of Hanukkah, which is, right, that it was a secondary tikkun event that allowed the Jews to accept the Orishan, the Messianic Light. You see, we now understand that the real miracle was the war, but what communicated to the Jews the meaning of what they had accomplished was the Ner, was the Menorah. You see, now there are 8 lights. So Kabbalistically, 8 lights. The 8th Olam Haba begins on the 8th day, and therefore there are 8 lights. And also, it's supposed to be Hidur, which means that each light is supposed to be Mohuda, beautiful. And the reason for that is because the Orishan is beautiful. Like I said, Hodoloi. So therefore the lights have to be beautiful, you see. And also, you can't use them. You can only look at them. We say that in Haneas Halolo. Also, Lishtamish Behem. Why? Because the light represents insight, wisdom. And wisdom you look at, but you don't use it. Because these lights of a Chanukah menorah, they represent the Orishan, you see. So, when you will light the Chanukah lights and you will look at them, right, for a half hour, you will be looking at the Orishan, the actual Messianic light that will shine someday, hopefully very near in the future. So therefore, we now understand what Hanukkah is. It is the holiday of the Mashiach. That's really what it is. You see, it is the holiday of the Messianic light that the Jews rectified more than 2,000 years ago. But we continue to light the menorah because what we show is that we believe in the belief of the Orishan. And that belief is that the root of everything is God, you see. And that is the Orishan which we someday are going to see when it says that the earth will be filled with the knowledge of God. Why? Because that is all knowledge. Because then we will see how everything emanates or emerges from that light. That is what Hanukkah is really all about. It is a Messianic holiday that represents the Orishon. Very powerful. Very powerful. Okay, any questions?
Well, one thing, Rabbi, the dreidel, it also spells Goshna, like Goshen with the hay. And
Yes.
Yaakov Avinu, I learned, was hinting that the only way that you could really follow the way of Hashem is with Torah. That's why he told Yehuda, go set up your yeshivot there before the people came, before
Yes.
the family came. And I took a class that said something that it was a hint with the dreidel was really about learning Torah, those letters.
Okay, that's nice.
True?
It certainly is a nice remez. You know?
No, that's what I learned. And now, what do you think about the Ayatollah?
What was
He
that?
died. The guy from
What?
Iran, the leader, died.
Which leader?
Ayatollah Khamenei.
It's not confirmed.
Where did you hear that he died?
I kept
not
getting
confirmed.
notices yesterday. So what
it's
is
not
it?
confirmed. They're speculating that the Ayatollah has passed away. A week
Why?
ago,
What's it based on?
A week ago, he gave his seat up to his son due to health concerns, and then yesterday they claimed that there was intel that he had passed away, but nothing was confirmed. So it's not for sure.
Boy, would that be something, huh?
Yeah. And there's huge flooding in Iran, Rabbi. It looks like the Mabul is all up in Iran. It's crazy.
Why is there flooding? Rain?
Rain, excess rain, and they have no irrigation system. So it's just like piling up. It looks like the ocean in the streets.
Really? In which city?
Yeah.
All of them? Tehran.
I don't know exactly, but I was looking at videos. It was crazy.
But that's amazing that you think that, although it's not confirmed, is that the Ayatollah Khamenei died.
Yeah.
Well, the fact that he gave up the seat means something happened.
Yes,
His
definitely.
power.
That's interesting. Wow.
Really?
What a
Where
blow.
is this Mashiach already? It's really bothering me. Why can't he just come already?
You're right. We got to tell him that Rachel is bothered.
I'll tell him myself.
Okay.
If I knew who he was, I'd give him Waze and a smartphone to get here.
Uh-oh. And now I know why he's not coming. He's afraid of Rachel. What?
Rabbi, I have a question. So, during the times of when the Hashmonaim and the Kohanim, they didn't give up the seat to
the kingdom, yeah.
Yes. None of them had nevuah that if they did that, Mashiach would come?
Well, power is power. Look, you have to remember the Hashmonaim, as time went on, they get very, very bad. The original Hashmonaim, which is Matisyahu and Yehuda Maccabee, they were tzaddikim, but they were involved in the war itself. But the question is after the war. Remember, the war took a long time to finish. 3 years after the war started, that's when you had the miracle of the Hanukkah lights. But the war dragged on for many years until they finally got rid of everybody, until they got rid of all the Greeks. So by the time that happened, the Hashmonaim who inherited, there's a whole bunch of guys. If you read Jewish history, Aristobulus and all these guys, they were Rishoim. They did not want to give it up. They couldn't care less what the rabbis were telling them. You see. So it's only in the beginning that the Hashmonaim were tzaddikim. But as time went on, they were terrible.
Even if they were Kohanim?
Yeah, even if they were Kohanim.
They
Exactly.
were practicing in the Beit HaMikdash?
Yes.
Yeah.
Sure. Because the Beit HaMikdash continued, right? It was rededicated, right, in 163 BCE, before Common Era, and it was destroyed, we know, in 70 CE by the Romans. So it went on for at least another 230 years or whatever,
So now, in the Menorah, when we're lighting the candles, what do you recommend us to do, to say, our mind?
Well, I think the main kavanah is that we pray that the Mashiach should come, and that the entire world should see the Gilui, the revelation of the Orishan. And the essential idea is Eined Muvadei. That's what the Orishan is, that besides God, He is the only one that really is, like I said, Yom Echad. The concept of Yom Echad is the concept of the Or Mashiach. And like I say, Bohem Amim Yenagach, He will go the nations with this Chokhmah, you see, and they will realize that everything that they thought, that there's a whole physics and it's all natural law, all of this was wrong. So when you light the Hanukkah menorah, what you're really thinking of, right, is the Orishan, is that we believe that God is the essence and the ultimate root of everything. You see, it's an emunah about the whole concept of Mashiach and what He will reveal. You see.
Rabbi, I learned that when you light the candles, not only does Hashem come down to your home with the Malachim, but that your grandparents, great-grandparents, all the way down to Adam Harishon, all the Neshamot come down to your home when you light the candles.
You talking about Hanukkah or Shabbos?
Hanukkah.
Okay. Yeah.
What do you know about Shabbos? What happens on Shabbos?
Well, Shabbos is another concept. Why the Malachim come by Shabbos? That's a whole shiur. Maybe I should give that.
Then we should do that. I would love to hear that.
Yeah, what Shabbos really is. Most people have no idea. It's amazing how a guy can go through Shabbos his whole life and never really know the pnimiyut of Shabbat and why the Malachim come.
Let's do that.
Yeah, maybe I should give it next week.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, since we're talking about candles and lights, maybe that would be appropriate. How's that sound?
That's good.
Rabbi, do you still have hope that Trump is going to win?
Yes. Well, he's still fighting.
He is.
You saw what happened this week, Rabbi? That a lady from the senator was they were in court, and a senator was saying, well, do you have any proof with her assistant? And then they found out she was being videoed. She was one of the people that threw everybody out of the room and took the luggage of ballots from under the table and was scanning it in the machine. She was doing the illegal stuff herself.
She's the judge?
She was a senator who was at the hearing. And,
are you serious?
Yes, it was Neshmin Shamayim. Now she was all flustered when they go, you need proof? They go, isn't this you?
Wow, that's a felony.
So crazy.
What they did is a felony. Yep. And she's a senator?
Exactly. No, they didn't know that the room had a surveillance.
A video, yeah. So you're saying that
and
a senator
came out her hair? What?
You're saying a senator was one of the people doing the counting?
Yes. That's how corrupt it was.
Wow.
What state?
It was a state senator, not a senator.
State senator. I see.
State senator.
So what? It's still a felony.
Still a felony, but her title is different.
Sure. But he's still fighting.
Yes, he had a rally, and he said he's still going to fight.
Yeah, why not? Yeah, they have proof. They have to get it to the Supreme Court.
Well, one of the Supreme Courts, the judge, one of them in Atlanta, Georgia, said you could take the machines and investigate it and see what's going on. You have there's a lot of discrepancies that you could now do your own forensics.
Oh, yeah?
Yep, so the wheels are turning. Let's see the miracles of Hanukkah happen.
That's right. We're getting close. Exactly.
Rabbi, so right now, I feel like we're in a pause, or in limbo. Like, it's like Hashem deciding what He's gonna do. Is that the right feeling of what's the now moment?
No, God doesn't decide what to do. The process
based on our actions, obviously.
The process is what's called kitrugim.
Okay.
There's a tremendous battle going on now in heaven, where the Satan is trying to destroy the Trump, because he is of tremendous assistance to Israel. So he's trying to destroy him, and the way he tries is through kitrugim, through prosecutions. That's his weapon. So there's a tremendous battle going on in heaven now. Who is going to win the verdict? It's the same thing that went on by Kriyat Yamsuf when they crossed the Red Sea. Same thing. There was a tremendous battle where the Malachim said, why should the Egyptians die? The Jews also worship idols. So there's a tremendous battle being waged in heaven now. And ultimately, I'm very hopeful that the battle will be where Trump will win, and he will continue to change the Middle East, and it'll just move forward. That somehow the Messianic Light will come out shortly.
Which rabbi was it, Amy, that said that we have to come to Israel right away?
Kanievsky's assistant or something.
You mean because the Mashiach is right around the corner? Is that why?
Yeah.
And that Gog uMagog is going to happen.
Well, okay. We don't know yet. We're hoping, Look, this is a very good month.
Do you feel that we're closer? Do you feel now more than ever that we're closer?
There's no question that we are closer, because what we're witnessing now has never happened before. But whoever heard, whoever heard that a president of the United States is now condemning the Democratic Party? You know what I'm saying? Whoever heard of something like that? And the fact that they hate him, it's just incredible to watch this kind of hatred. You know what I mean? This whole thing is like, people walk around in a daze. Like, whatever happened to the United States? I mean, the United States has become a banana republic. Look, there are 4 things that they've damaged the Democratic Party. The first is that they've denied Trump a real presidency. The second thing is that they have disenfranchised 74 million people who voted for him. The third thing is that even Democrats, right, have to be shocked at what the Democratic Party is doing. Not all the Democrats are corrupt. They have to be shocked in terms of what they're doing to the United States. I mean, the United States looks like a third world country. They're doing the same things that many countries, that Venezuela do. And the fourth thing, which I hold also, is it's a terrible, it's a terrible stigma. Because the United States is really one of the few countries in the world that in a certain sense is honest and has integrity and has justice. So they, in certain ways, serve as a model. But when all of a sudden everybody's aware that there's an incredible corruption and scandal happening in the United States that never happened before like this, then that is a terrible signal to the world that the United States is no longer a model, and the people don't have to look at the United States as some type of a model. But on the contrary, the United States has become as corrupt as Venezuela. And that is a terrible deed, you see. So these are 4 sins that the Democratic Party has done. You see. Look, I'm hopeful that the Democratic Party will lose, Trump will win, and then when he wins, he's going to go after every one of them. You see. I believe he's going to fire Barr, because Barr's doing nothing, and he's going to put in a whole different attorney general, and they're going to convict and go after every single person that was involved in the scandal of the election. Everyone. You see, because they have a tremendous
Obama and Hillary.
Oh, yes, certainly. Yes. Yeah. And he will spare no one.
Rabbi, do you really think Rudy Giuliani has corona, or he's hiding from the deep state?
No. He probably has corona. It's amazing. You know.
So I have two questions, Rabbi. One, so Hashem is still keeping corona around, because right now it's at the forefront, but it's really not. Everyone right now feels like they're just using it against us. What's more at the forefront right now is the vaccine, that everyone doesn't want to take it, and basically the election. So why is corona still lingering?
Well, actually, as soon as it comes out and people start taking it and people realize that it's safe, then everybody will take it.
But Rabbi, they're saying such horrible things about the side effects of this vaccine, that it's not safe at all, and it doesn't even help.
Who said that?
It affects fertility with women.
No,
that
but
what?
also they say that the vaccine, it lessens your symptoms, but it doesn't stop you from infecting others.
Well, what does it do
and
to the...
And it doesn't stop you from getting it again.
What does it do to the virus?
It just lessens your symptoms.
But what, doesn't it kill the virus?
It doesn't kill it where you can infect someone. It kills it within you just the way you're feeling. But then it still infect other people.
I don't know. See, I don't know what's real and what's false. I don't know.
Exactly. So is that the Or HaMashiach that's going to come and tell us everything?
No, the Or HaMashiach is not related to that. Look, COVID has had a specific purpose. But I believe...
The truth about everything. The truth.
Well, that's certainly true. You know, that's certainly true. But I believe that COVID is on its way out. Because I believe ultimately...
No, it's starting again yet.
It's what?
There's a lot of cases in our community right now.
Yeah, so what I mean is that the vaccine will begin to put an end to the whole COVID. And I think that's really what everybody's waiting for. You know?
I'm dreading it. I'm the opposite.
Rabbi, you would take this vaccine?
Yeah, he said yes.
Yes.
Wow.
Now, how long can I hide in my house?
I know, but you don't think
that at least you're healthy than not knowing the effects of what really it is. I mean, Europe is already suing the vaccine because of all the side effects that it has and how unhealthy it is. But they're going after this vaccine, saying that it's not even healthy at all.
Well, you have to remember there are many companies working on a vaccine. Besides Pfizer and Moderna, Israel is now, I think, in phase 1 or phase 2. Israel is coming out with a vaccine, and Oxford also has come out with a vaccine, which is different. It works in a different way. It's a bunch of different vaccine, the one from England. They're almost finished with that. So therefore, I believe that one of the vaccines has to work.
How do you know which vaccine to go? That's what we're...
Well, look, there's going to be tremendous amount of articles written about the vaccines, I can guarantee you.
And how do you know which ones are real and which ones are fake? That's our problems right now.
Yeah, how do you know what they're saying is true or not true?
Well, you don't know. I mean, ultimately, there will be people who are honest, Probably there are people in the Jewish community, that are honest, and they will.
You can't trust anyone, Rabbi. This is all business. This is money. They're all looking for money. You're just a number to these people. They don't care about your life or if you die.
Well, okay, listen, you just have to, see what happens. Can't answer it now, but let it come out, and there's a lot of it that's going to come out. Right now there's, two are coming out. Oxford will come out soon, and you'll have Israel. You'll have many vaccines coming out, and there'll be a tremendous amount of literature written on which ones have side effects and so on. So at that point, you make a decision. That's all. You know what I mean?
Okay, Rabbi, I have a question. My second question.
Yeah.
You said that when the Messianic Light does come out, the Or HaMashiach, then the Mashiach ben David will be revealed.
Yes.
Okay, so what stage is that? Is that when he's actually known on the world stage? Is that is that at the beginning? What is that?
No, it's not the beginning. When he comes out, he begins to be revealed in a sense that whatever he puts his hands on is successful. That's what indicates who he really is. That the man never fails. Everything he wants to do succeeds. And, people will begin to realize, hey, this is really incredible. Whatever he does, he's successful. And people take notice of that. And as time goes on, right, it'll be not just he's successful, let's say more physical things, but all of a sudden he will be successful in what is called Ruach HaKodesh. He will be able to look at you and tell you everything about yourself. And ultimately speaking, he may even be able to, perform miracles. But whatever is planned, after a while, it becomes obvious of who this man is, because he never fails. And probably he will be an individual that can perform many, many nisim, miracles. So we're not talking about, a person who says he does. And he will have that koyach. And then ultimately, as I once said, you will have the Beis Hamikdash. Look, a great deal of all this is hidden, how it will actually happen. But it has to happen soon, because we're looking at a complete turnover of the world. And that takes a lot of time, you see. The world will not change in 1 year. It takes a long time. And God has to start the process sometime. And it has to be soon. And I'm hoping that it's very soon. What was that?
What do you mean by a turnover?
The world will be different in the era, even of Mashiach ben Yosef, because in his time, the Beit HaMikdash will be built. And that already has the divine presence. That has the Shekhinah, right? Then all the Jews will ultimately move to Israel. It'll be a different government altogether. We cannot even imagine the tremendous mahapecha, turnover, that this world will have in the time of even Mashiach ben Yosef. Forget about Mashiach ben David. That's a whole different reality, because then you don't have any more death, nothing. The Satan is killed. That, the age of Mashiach ben David, is something we cannot even imagine what that is, because their nature is removed, is controverted. But even in the time of Mashiach ben Yosef, you will see tremendous things. You see, so we don't know how they exactly will happen. But they have to begin soon. What was that?
Does it say, any month, a specific month that they expect the Mashiach ben Yosef to come? Not in our year, I'm saying in general. Is there any hints as to a month?
Well, the general statement is that in Nisan, it says in Nisan they were redeemed, and in Nisan they will be redeemed. But that is probably referring to Mashiach ben David.
Right.
So it doesn't really say when Mashiach ben Yosef. Although I'll be honest with you, this month is a great candidate, because the Or Rishon will be given by the Mashiach ben Yosef. And this month is a great month, Sigula, for him to come.
Like, what do he could start, like, he'll start in the, like, you'll start seeing him in the news or something? Like, you'll start...
Well, again, it's hard to know exactly what will happen because we've never seen anything like that. But remember, we are not talking here about a salvation, a Yeshua. We are talking about a redemption, Gula. A redemption is the end. That's an incredible turnover. That's a whole different understanding, because a redemption signifies the end of the world, you see, and a reintroduction to Adam HaRishon before the sin. We have no idea what that is, you see. But the main thing is that it has to start.
Few other rabbis are saying that 5782, Mashiach is going to come, Ben David.
Well, 5,782 is Shemitah, Shvius. And it does say that the Mashiach comes by Maitzoi Shemitah, at the end of Shemitah.
Really?
Yeah. That's what it says. That the Mashiach comes at the end of Shemitah, which is not this year, it's next year, Rosh Hashanah. Next year, Shemitah, yeah. We are in Erev Shemitah this year.
So that means that Yosef will come this year and then David next year? That's quick.
Well, it could mean that he comes this year, but he is recognized as Mashiach next year.
Got it.
Because that takes time. The Mashiach will come, and we don't even know that he's Mashiach. As time goes on, it becomes apparent, obvious, that he is the Mashiach himself. But that takes time.
Do you think he knows Mashiach ben Yosef? That he's Mashiach ben Yosef by now?
I would imagine he may suspect. He may suspect who he is. Because he may see things. He may see things brightening up in his future. Right?
So how come a couple of rabbis are saying that he's in Israel now? But I thought he was in America.
Who says they're right?
Who says they're right?
Right? How do they know? Did they talk to him?
Correct.
Nobody really knows where he is. Nobody really knows who he is. Although it seems indicative that Reb Chaim Kanievsky says that he is here.
Here where?
He's here on the planet.
America.
Oh, in the planet. I'm asking about America.
Well, no. He doesn't say where he is, but he says that you hear statements from him that he believes he is now alive, and he's now here. And it's only a matter of time until he reveals himself. Apparently that's what he believes. To me, it sounds like he saw him.
I remember I read somewhere how there was a rabbi who saw Mashiach in a different generation. I forgot which one. And the rabbi didn't stand up for him. And then the Mashiach got upset that the rabbi didn't know who he was. So
yeah, they say that on David Abu Chatzera. They say that on David Abu Chatzera.
Yes.
His father came to him in a dream. His grandfather, I think the Baba Sali.
Yes.
David Abu Chatzera from Nahariya. Right? So his grandfather, I think it was the Baba Sali, came to him in a dream. That's what I heard. And was very angry at him. He says, I don't stand you. The Mashiach ben Yosef came to you and you didn't stand up. Or ben Yosef, I don't know which one. So he was shocked. So from now on he stands up for every Jew that comes in to see him.
Crazy.
Wow.
That's what they say.
Yes.
You know? Listen, oid ma'at, a little more, and that's it. The main thing is once it begins, it is unstoppable and irreversible. That's the critical factor. When does it begin? In other words, how long it takes, fine. So it'll take time to unfold, right? Just like the sun. The sun rises, right? But in the beginning, all you see is light, the dawn. Then all of a sudden you see the orb of the sun. And even then you only see a little bit. It takes time till it reaches high noon. Same thing with Mashiach. But the critical thing is that it should finally end the night. That's what we're waiting for. When does the night end and the dawn begins? That's what we're all waiting for. Because once the dawn begins, it can never go back. And the Geulah, the end, will come. Okay?
Thank you, Rabbi.
Okay. Anyway,
Thank you,
think about it. Have a great Chanukah.
Sameach, Rabbi.
Have a happy holiday.
Do you people make latkes?
Yes.
Of course.
I wasn't sure what Sfardim do.
Kids and everything, Rabbi.
Yeah, we eat a lot.
You eat a lot, huh?
Yeah.
Okay.
Dairy. We're going to eat the dairy. We're going to have the latkes. We're going to spin the dreidel and light the candles and sing songs.
Oh, wow.
Meditate
Okay.
on the light.
Sounds great. It's too bad. If it wasn't for COVID, it would be nice to have a Hanukkah party.
Oh, I would have loved
We're
that.
having one.
Yeah,
What?
that would be great, Rabbi.
We're having one, Rabbi, on Thursday. You're invited.
Well, like I say, if it wasn't for COVID, it would be nice to have a Hanukkah party.
Bezat Hashem next year, and even in bedtime.
In Israel, Rabbi, in Israel, we'll all spend Hanukkah together.
Yes, that's right.
By the way, Rabbi, just now in Tehran, they put an Israeli flag with the words on a bridge in Tehran, "Thank you, Mossad." The people are thanking the Israelis for killing the guy, the scientist.
I don't know. I don't think they would do that.
But it's right here. It's posted up here. They're showing pictures of the bridge that said, "Thank you, Mossad."
You mean because they think he killed Khomeini?
No, they think they killed that scientist.
The scientist.
Who does the bomb.
Yeah, that's what they say.
Scientist.
Yeah, the nuclear one. Yeah, that was a real blow to Iran. A real blow.
Good. Hashem
this would be...
we're sitting quiet, and Hashem's doing our battles for us.
Exactly. That's exactly what's happening.